The obsidian spire of the Cathar Imperium pierced the roiling, violet clouds of its homeworld, a monument to unyielding power and tradition. Within its highest chamber, where the air was thin and heavy with the scent of ionized metal and aged ozone, the conclave of whispers convened. Light, filtered through crystalline walls that shimmered with captured starlight, cast long, distorted shadows across the polished floor, a mosaic of worlds conquered and civilizations absorbed. Here, the air itself was a testament to dominion, each particle humming with the energy of a throne that had commanded a significant portion of the spiral arm for millennia. Seated around the central dais, a suspended platform of pure, solidified energy, were the delegates of the Imperium's core species, their forms a diverse and intimidating tapestry of galactic evolution. There was the chitinous bulk of the Vex, their multifaceted eyes unblinking, their thoughts a low, continuous thrum in the psionic medium. Opposite them sat the ethereal, formless emissaries of the Lumina, their consciousness a gentle, shimmering presence within containment fields that pulsed with soft, internal light. And at the head, upon a throne carved from the heart of a dead star, was the Cathar Chancellor, a being whose very posture radiated an ancient and unassailable authority, his reptilian features set in a mask of stern contemplation. The subject of their deliberation, the source of attention so profound it seemed to warp the very light in the chamber, was a species that had only recently emerged from the obscurity of its solitary star system. They called themselves humans. The initial reports had been dismissed as inconsequential, the ramblings of deep space prospectors who had strayed too far into the uncharted territories of the Orion Spur. But the reports had persisted, growing in frequency and detail, painting a picture of a species that was both primitive and terrifyingly effective. The Cathar, in their infinite and patient wisdom, had dispatched scout fleets, cloaked observation drones, and psionic probes to gather intelligence. The data they had collected was a tapestry of contradictions, a maddening puzzle that defied the Imperium's long-established metrics for classifying nascent civilizations. The humans possessed technology that was, in many respects, laughably crude. Their ships were ungainly, brutish constructs of metal and fire, spewing radiation and leaving clumsy, detectable trails in the fabric of spacetime. Yet they moved with a speed and an unpredictable aggression that had caught more than one Cathar patrol off guard. Their communications were a chaotic cacophony of unsecured electromagnetic waves, a stark contrast to the elegant, encrypted psionic network that bound the Imperium together. But it was not their technology or their chaotic data streams that had brought the conclave to this state of hushed gravity. It was their soldiers. Holographic emitters in the center of the chamber flickered to life, casting a three-dimensional rendering of a recent skirmish on a desolate moon. The image was raw, unedited footage from a destroyed Cathar scout drone. It showed human soldiers, clad in bulky, primitive armor, engaging a Cathar infantry phalanx. But these were not soldiers in any sense the Imperium understood. They moved with a feral, unrestrained fury, a primal savagery that was deeply unsettling to the Cathar's ordered and disciplined mind. They roared, their voices amplified by their helmets into bestial howls that echoed in the dead silence of the moon's vacuum. They fought not with the precise, energy-based weaponry of the Imperium, but with crude, kinetic projectiles, and in moments of extreme proximity, with brutal physical force. The recording showed one human soldier, its armor breached and smoking, discard its weapon and charge a Cathar warrior, tackling the larger, more powerful being to the ground and continuing the fight with fists and a ferocity that bordered on madness. The Chancellor gestured, and the image froze on the human's helmeted face, the visor shattered, revealing eyes that burned with a terrifying, unthinking rage. This, the Chancellor's voice was a low rumble like stones grinding together in the deep earth, is what we are facing. A species that embraces the chaos of its most primitive instincts. They fight not as a cohesive, disciplined force, but as a pack of enraged animals. Our strategists are baffled. Our psychologists are disturbed. They do not value their own lives. They throw themselves at our phalanxes with a suicidal abandon that serves no tactical purpose. They are a plague of rage, a wildfire of instinct spreading from a single, insignificant world. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent chamber. The Vex delegate has counseled immediate, overwhelming force, a cleansing fire to sterilize the contagion before it can spread further. The Vex delegate, a Taurin, insectoid creature whose chitinous plates were scarred with the marks of countless battles, shifted its massive frame. Its voice was a series of sharp, clicking sounds, translated by a small, floating orb into the Imperium's formal diplomatic language. Contagion is the correct term, Chancellor. We have analyzed their battle cries, the micro-expressions our probes have managed to capture. There is no strategy, no higher thought. It is pure, unadulterated predator instinct. They are a biological anomaly, a throwback to an earlier, more brutal stage of evolution that should have been bred out of them eons ago. To allow them to exist, to potentially spread their philosophy of rage and chaos to other, more impressionable species, would be an act of galactic negligence. They are not a civilization to be negotiated with. They are a pestilence to be eradicated. A soft, chiming sound emanated from the Lumina containment fields. The ethereal light within pulsed, and a voice, serene and melodic, filled the chamber, a stark contrast to the Vex's harsh clicks. And yet, Delegate, there are inconsistencies. Their technology, while crude, shows a remarkable understanding of fundamental physics. Their expansion, while aggressive, has been selective. They have not engaged in wanton destruction. They have only met force with force, and our psionic probes. They have returned with fragmented, confusing impressions. They sense the rage, the fury, but beneath it, there is something else. A quietness. A stillness that is profoundly at odds with their outward behavior. It is as if the storm is a fabrication, a carefully constructed illusion. The Vex delegate emitted a derisive series of clicks. Illusions, we see their actions. We see them tear our warriors apart with their bare hands. We hear their howls of bloodlust. Are we to ignore the evidence of our senses in favor of your vague, psionic feelings? The Lumina have always been too willing to see complexity where there is only simple, brutal truth. They are beasts, and beasts must be caged or put down. The Chancellor held up a three-fingered hand, silencing the brewing argument. His ancient eyes, slits of molten gold, swept across the delegates. The Lumina's point is not without merit. The contradictions are too numerous to ignore. Their ships, for all their crudeness, are shielded in a way that our energy weapons find difficult to penetrate. Their projectiles, though primitive, are guided with a precision that suggests a sophisticated understanding of ballistics and targeting. And there is the matter of their communication. While their open channels are a chaotic mess, our deepest probes have detected whispers. Faint, encrypted signals buried beneath the noise. Signals that are structured, complex, and utterly indecipherable. It is as if their entire civilization is a fortress with a facade of primitive barbarism designed to repel invaders, while within something else resides. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that sent a shiver through the very air of the chamber. We have captured one of them. A collective stir went through the conclave. Capturing a live human soldier was a feat that had, until now, been deemed impossible. They fought to the death, and their armor was often rigged to self-destruct upon the wearer's demise, leaving nothing but scorched metal and vaporized flesh. The specimen was taken from the recent skirmish on the moon of Xylos, the Chancellor continued. It was heavily wounded, its armor compromised. We were able to neutralize it and bring it to a secure facility in the core worlds. It has been under observation for several rotations. We have learned things. He gestured to the holographic emitters again. The image of the battlefield dissolved, replaced by a live feed from a sterile, white observation chamber. In the center of the room, restrained on a medical platform, was a human. Its bulky armor had been removed, revealing a surprisingly slender, bipedal form. Its skin was pale, its hair a dark shock against the white of the platform. It was unconscious, its chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. Wires and sensors snaked across its body, feeding a constant stream of data to monitors that flickered with complex biological readings. Our initial biological scans confirmed our worst fears, the Chancellor said, his voice grim. Its physiology is remarkably resilient. It can survive in a wide range of atmospheric conditions. Its adrenal system is hyperactive. It is capable of producing a cocktail of chemicals that induces a state of extreme aggression and heightened physical strength, while simultaneously suppressing pain and fear. It is, in essence, a biological weapon, a creature bred for relentless, brutal combat. The Vex delegate clicked in satisfaction. As I predicted, a species of natural-born killers. There is no need for further deliberation. The evidence is before us. We must act. Ashen's delegate, the Chancellor cautioned, his gaze fixed on the unconscious human. There is more. We have attempted to interface with its mind. Our psionicists have found it difficult. Its consciousness is shielded, layered. The surface thoughts are a maelstrom of rage, a chaotic storm that repels any attempt at deeper contact. But one of our most gifted inquisitors managed to breach the first layer, and what he found beneath, it was not what we expected. The Chancellor fell silent, the tension in the chamber stretching to a breaking point. The delegates leaned forward, their attention riveted to the still form in the hologram. Beneath the storm, the Chancellor finally continued, his voice barely a whisper, there was silence, a profound, unbreachable calm, an ocean of tranquility so deep and so vast that our Inquisitor was lost in it. He described it as a meditative state, a place of pure, unfiltered logic and serenity. He could not reconcile it with the surface rage. It was as if he had encountered two different beings inhabiting the same mind, the beast on the surface and something else. Something ancient and quiet, hiding in the depths. The lumina's light pulsed with a soft, inquisitive glow. A dual consciousness, or a form of highly advanced psychological conditioning. Perhaps their savagery is not instinct but a tool, a weaponized persona. Precisely, the Chancellor confirmed. Our Inquisitor believes that the rage, the bestial fury, is a performance, a deliberate, controlled act of psychological warfare, a mask they wear to terrify their enemies, to make us underestimate them, to make us believe they are nothing more than mindless brutes. They are faking beasts. The words hung in the air, a revelation so profound it seemed to shake the very foundations of the obsidian spire. The delegates stared at the hologram, at the unconscious human, no longer seeing a simple, savage creature but a puzzle of infinite complexity, a mystery wrapped in a terrifying enigma. The silence in the chamber was no longer one of mere tension, but of a dawning, chilling awe. The conclave of whispers, for the first time in 1,000 years, was faced with an opponent they did not understand. And in that not knowing, for the first time in 1,000 years, they felt a flicker of something that was almost, but not quite, fear. The universe, which had for so long been a predictable, ordered place under the steady, guiding hand of the Cathar Imperium, had suddenly become a much larger and much more dangerous place. The quiet human on the medical platform, in its enforced slumber, had become the focal point of a galactic empire's dawning uncertainty, the harbinger of an age of profound and terrifying change. The beast was a lie, and the truth, they were beginning to suspect, was something far more formidable. The days that followed the Chancellor's revelation were a period of intense, almost frantic re-evaluation within the Cathar Imperium. The long-held certainties that had guided their galactic policy for millennia were crumbling like ancient stone. The universe, once a predictable tapestry of rising and falling civilizations, each following a well-understood trajectory of technological and social development, now seemed to hold a terrifying new variable: humanity. The word was no longer spoken with arrogance or dismissal, but with a hushed, cautious respect. The Imperium's vast intelligence network was redirected, its focus narrowed to this one enigmatic species. Fleets were pulled back from territorial disputes on the Outer Rim, research projects were put on hold, and the full, formidable weight of the Cathar analytical engine was brought to bear on the human puzzle. The initial reports that came back only deepened the mystery. Human society was a chaotic, fragmented thing, a collection of competing nation-states and ideologies that seemed to be in a constant state of low-level conflict with one another. To the Cathar, whose own civilization had achieved a state of rigid monolithic unity eons ago, this was a sign of profound immaturity. Yet, when faced with an external threat, they united with a speed and a ferocity that was breathtaking. Their internal squabbles were set aside, their competing factions merged into a single, cohesive war machine. It was a paradox that the Cathar, with their linear, ordered view of societal evolution, could not comprehend. Their culture was equally baffling. It was a cacophony of art, music, and literature, a wild, untamed garden of emotional expression that ranged from the darkest depths of despair to the most transcendent heights of joy. The Cathar, a species that had long ago sublimated individual emotion in favor of collective, logical duty, found it both fascinating and deeply disturbing. But it was their military doctrine that remained the most unsettling enigma. The theory that their bestial rage was a facade, a form of psychological warfare, was gaining traction among the high command. They began to analyze the battle footage with new eyes, looking past the roars and the brutal charges, searching for the patterns beneath the chaos. And they began to find them. The suicidal charges were not random. They were precisely targeted, designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Cathar phalanx formations that had been identified with terrifying accuracy. The mindless roars were not just noise. They were coded signals, a form of battlefield communication that was both brutally effective and utterly impenetrable to Cathar signal intelligence. The unthinking rage was a mask, but behind it was a cold, calculating intelligence of a kind the Imperium had never before encountered. They were not just faking beasts. They were using the persona of the beast as a weapon, a tool to lull their opponents into a false sense of superiority, to make them misjudge, to make them make mistakes. And the Cathar, for all their ancient wisdom and technological might, had fallen for it completely. The decision was made, not without a great deal of heated debate within the conclave, to initiate contact. Not a military engagement, but a diplomatic one. It was a move that went against every instinct of the Cathar, a species that had always negotiated from a position of unassailable strength. But they were no longer certain of their strength, and they knew, with a chilling certainty, that to continue to treat the humans as mindless savages would be a mistake of catastrophic proportions. A message was sent, not through the chaotic, open channels the humans used, but through the encrypted, deep-layer network the Cathar probes had discovered. It was a simple message, a formal request for a diplomatic exchange, sent with all the pomp and ceremony befitting a galactic empire. The response, when it came, was as surprising as everything else about this perplexing species. It was not a boastful, aggressive reply, nor was it a fearful, supplicating one. It was a calm, professional, and almost casual acceptance. The humans agreed to a meeting, suggesting a neutral location in a desolate, unclaimed star system, and they agreed to send a single ship. The Cathar delegation, by contrast, arrived in a flotilla of warships that blotted out the light of the system's pale, distant star. The Chancellor himself was present, his flagship, the Unflinching Will, a vessel the size of a small moon, a gleaming spear of black metal and pulsating energy. It was a display of power, a reminder to these upstart humans of who they were dealing with. But as the human ship dropped out of its faster-than-light transit, a tiny speck against the vastness of space, the Cathar felt a familiar flicker of uncertainty. The ship was small, unarmed, and of a design they had never seen before. It was not one of their brutish, ugly warships. It was a sleek, elegant vessel, shaped like a polished river stone, its hull a seamless, shimmering white that seemed to absorb and soften the harsh light of the star. It radiated no heat, no energy, no detectable emissions of any kind. It was a ghost in the void, a silent, graceful presence that was utterly at odds with the image of a chaotic, aggressive species. The human delegation was received in the grand audience chamber of the Unflinching Will, a cavernous space designed to intimidate and overawe. The Chancellor sat upon his command throne, flanked by his royal guard, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh, white light. The air was thick with a tense, expectant silence. The doors at the far end of the chamber hissed open, and 3 figures entered. They were not wearing the bulky, intimidating armor of the human soldiers. They were clad in simple, form-fitting gray uniforms, devoid of any rank or insignia. 2 were male, 1 female. They were unarmed. They walked with a calm, unhurried grace, their eyes taking in the vastness of the chamber and the intimidating spectacle of the Cathar delegation without a flicker of fear or surprise. They moved with a profound and unsettling stillness, an economy of motion that spoke of a deep inner discipline. The lead human, a man with gray at his temples and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, stopped before the Chancellor's throne and offered a slight, respectful bow. "Chancellor," he said, his voice calm and even his pronunciation of the Cathar title flawless, "I am Ambassador Thorn of the Terran Confederacy. I thank you for agreeing to this meeting." The lack of any electronic translator was the first shock. The human was speaking the Cathar's own complex, nuanced language as if he had been born to it. The psionicists in the chamber reached out with their minds and recoiled in surprise. The human's mind was not the chaotic, shielded storm they had encountered in the captured soldier. It was open, serene, and yet unreadable. It was like trying to read the surface of a perfectly still, infinitely deep lake. There we ray no thoughts to be plucked, no emotions to be sensed. There was only a profound and unshakable calm. The Chancellor, for his part, was a master of concealing his own surprise. He gestured to the ambassador. "You speak our language, Ambassador Thorn, an impressive feat. Our scholars have struggled to make sense of your own chaotic and illogical tongues." Thorn smiled, a small, subtle expression that did not quite reach his eyes. "Language is a reflection of the mind, Chancellor. Your language is one of order, of structure, of logic. It was not difficult to learn. Our own languages, they reflect the diversity of our own consciousness. They are more challenging, I admit." The vexed delegate, present as an observer, shifted its bulk, its impatience a palpable force in the room. "We are not here to discuss linguistics, human. We are here to discuss your species' unprovoked aggression against the sovereign territory of the Cathar Imperium. We have recordings of your soldiers, your berserkers. They fight like maddened beasts. Explain this barbarism." Ambassador Thorn turned his calm, unreadable gaze to the Vex. "What you have witnessed, delegate, is a form of communication, a message tailored specifically for you." The Vex clicked in derision. "A message? You call that mindless savagery a message?" "Indeed," Thorn replied, his voice still maddeningly calm. "We have studied your species just as you have studied us. We know that the Cathar Imperium values strength, discipline, and order above all else. We also know that you view any deviation from that norm as a weakness, a sign of a primitive, undeveloped civilization. You are conquerors, but you are also predictable. You underestimate that which you do not understand, so we gave you something to misunderstand. We showed you a reflection of your own deepest fears about the chaos that lies beyond your borders. We showed you a beast because we knew that you would not respect anything less. We knew you would see it as a simple, brutal problem that could be solved with simple, brutal force. And in doing so, you would reveal your tactics, your strategies, your technology, your mindset. You would show us how you think. And you did." The chamber was silent. The Chancellor stared at the human, his ancient mind struggling to process the sheer audacity of the confession. The Cathar Imperium, the masters of 1,000 worlds, had been played. They had been manipulated, their own prejudices used against them with a skill and a subtlety that was as brilliant as it was terrifying. Thorn continued, his voice taking on a more serious, somber tone. "The soldiers you saw, they are our finest, our most disciplined. To do what they do, to channel that level of controlled, simulated rage to become the beast without succumbing to it, requires a level of psychological and emotional control that your species, with its suppression of all emotion, cannot possibly comprehend. They are not faking beasts, Chancellor. They are mastering the beast within. They are artists, and the battlefield is their canvas. Their performance was for you, and it was flawless." The Chancellor leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowed. "And the captured soldier, the one we have in our possession, his mind, the storm, the silence beneath." "A failsafe," Thorn said simply. "A psychic fortress. The storm you encountered is a psychic construct, a barrier of pure, chaotic emotion designed to repel any mental intrusion. It is exhausting to maintain, and it can be damaging to the individual, but it is effective. The silence beneath, that is the true mind of the soldier, the place of calm from which he directs the storm. The sanctuary he retreats to when the performance is over. You were never meant to see it. That your Inquisitor was able to breach the outer layer is impressive and concerning." The Lumina's light pulsed, and their melodic voice filled the chamber. "You speak of this as a performance, a strategy, but what is the purpose? What is your ultimate goal?" Ambassador Thorn turned to the Lumina's containment field, his expression softening for the first time. "Our goal is the same as yours: survival, understanding. We are a young species in a galaxy that is old and filled with dangers we are only just beginning to comprehend. We do not seek conflict, but we will not be subjugated, we will not be assimilated, and we will not be underestimated." He then turned his gaze back to the Chancellor, and for the first time the Cathar ruler saw a flicker of something in the human's eyes. It was not anger, not fear, not arrogance. It was a profound and unshakable resolve, a quiet strength that was more intimidating than any display of military might. "We came here today to offer you a choice, Chancellor. You can continue to see us as the beasts we have pretended to be. You can continue to wage a war that will cost both our species dearly, a war that you will eventually lose. Not because we are stronger or more advanced, but because we are more adaptable. We have survived millennia of conflict with ourselves. We have mastered the art of war in ways you have long since forgotten. Or you can see us for what we are. A species that is willing to do what is necessary to protect itself, but one that also yearns for peace, for knowledge, for a place in the galactic community." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Imperium is ancient, powerful, but it is stagnant. It has not been truly challenged in 1,000 years. You have forgotten how to innovate, how to adapt. We can help you remember. We can be partners, allies. The galaxy is vast, Chancellor. There are wonders to be discovered, mysteries to be solved. There are other things out there, things older and more powerful than either of us. We have seen them. We have heard their whispers in the dark." "We believe you have too." The Chancellor was silent for a long time, his gaze locked with the humans. He saw no deception, no trickery. He saw only a stark, unvarnished truth. The humans were not beasts. They were something far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more valuable. They were a mirror reflecting the Imperium's own complacency, its own arrogance, its own stagnation. And they were an opportunity. a chance to reawaken the spirit of exploration and discovery that had once been the driving force of the Cathar people. He thought of the whispers his own deep space probes had detected, the strange energy signatures from the intergalactic void, the ancient, dormant structures that his scientists had been unable to explain. He had dismissed them as anomalies, as insignificant data points in a well-ordered universe. But now he saw them as a warning, a premonition. Slowly, deliberately, the Cathar Chancellor rose from his throne. It was a gesture he had not made to a foreign dignitary in over 500 years. He descended the steps of the dais, his heavy, ceremonial robes whispering against the polished floor. He stopped before Ambassador Thorn, the towering reptilian monarch, and the small, unassuming human. He looked into the human's calm, steady eyes, and for the first time he did not see an enemy. He saw a peer. "Ambassador Thorn," the Chancellor said, his voice no longer the rumbling command of an emperor but the thoughtful, considered tone of a scholar. "You have given us much to contemplate. Your performance was indeed flawless. Perhaps it is time for a new performance, one of cooperation. Tell us what you have heard in the dark." The alliance was not yet forged, the future not yet written, but in that moment in the heart of a Cathar warship, surrounded by the silent, awestruck witnesses of the conclave, a new chapter in the history of the galaxy had begun. The age of the Imperium was ending. The age of partnership was dawning, and the universe, with all its ancient and terrifying secrets, was waiting. The years that followed the first contact between the Terran Confederacy and the Cathar Imperium were a period of unprecedented change. The initial, tentative steps toward cooperation blossomed into a full-fledged alliance, a partnership that sent ripples of shock and disbelief throughout the known galaxy. The Cathar, the ancient, unyielding titans of the spiral arm, had embraced the chaotic, unpredictable humans as equals. It was a political shift of seismic proportions, and it was not without its internal struggles. The Vex and other hardline factions within the Imperium viewed the alliance as a betrayal of everything the Cathar stood for, a contamination of their pure, ordered society with the messy, emotional chaos of humanity. But the Chancellor, with a newfound vigor and a clarity of purpose he had not felt in centuries, held firm. He had seen the truth in Ambassador Thorn's eyes, and he had recognized the precipice upon which the galaxy stood. The exchange of knowledge and technology between the two species was a torrent. The humans, with their restless, innovative spirit, absorbed the Cathar's ancient, refined sciences, adapting and improving upon them with a speed that left the Cathar scientists breathless. Human engineers, unburdened by millennia of rigid tradition, found new and ingenious applications for Cathar energy systems, propulsion drives, and materials science. In return, the humans offered the Cathar something far more valuable than technology. They offered them a new perspective. They taught them about the power of art, the beauty of chaos, the strength that could be found in emotional expression. They introduced them to the concept of individuality, a notion that was both terrifying and intoxicating to a species that had submerged the self in the collective for eons. The Cathar, for the first time in their long, stoic history, began to dream again. But the true foundation of the alliance was built upon the shared secret that Ambassador Thorn had hinted at in that fur. Sent meeting the whispers in the dark. As they pooled their data, combining the Cathar's long-range sensor logs with humanity's more recent, but startlingly detailed deep space observations, a chilling picture began to emerge. Faint, recurring energy signatures that emanated from the vast, empty void between galaxies. Ghostly, indecipherable signals that seemed to predate the universe itself. And the most disturbing discovery of all, the abandoned megastructures. In the farthest, darkest corners of the galaxy, orbiting dead stars or drifting in the lonely abyss, were colossal artifacts of unknown origin. Dyson spheres that had long ago gone dark, ringworlds fractured and broken by some unimaginable force, entire solar systems that had been rearranged, their planets moved into impossible artificial orbits. They were cosmic graveyards, silent monuments to a power so vast it defied comprehension. A power that had, for some unknown reason, vanished. A joint scientific and military task force, the Aegis Initiative, was formed to investigate these anomalies. It was a fusion of Cathar discipline and human adaptability, a perfect synthesis of the two species' strengths. Cathar dreadnoughts, refitted with human-designed exploratory technology, pushed deeper into the unknown than either species had ever dared to venture alone. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, The flagship of the Aegis fleet, Ambassador Thorn, now a senior diplomat in the new alliance, stood beside the Cathar fleet commander, a grizzled old warrior named Xyler, a veteran of the initial skirmishes with humanity who had since become one of their most ardent supporters. They watched as the star charts on the main view screen resolved into a new, terrifying clarity. The megastructures were not randomly scattered. They formed a pattern, a perimeter. A vast galactic-scale defensive line, a wall built to keep something out, or perhaps to keep something in. Their destination was the source of the most powerful and persistent of the intergalactic signals, a point in the void designated Erebus. As they drew closer, the very fabric of spacetime seemed to grow thin, stretched taut by some unseen gravitational force. The ship's sensors, a fusion of Cathar precision and human ingenuity, struggled to make sense of the readings. The signal was not a communication, not in any sense they understood. It was a warning. A repeating mathematical sequence of such complexity that it took the combined analytical engines of the fleet months to decipher it. And when they did, the message was as simple as it was terrifying. Flee! It is coming! The silence. They arrived at Erebus to find not a source but an absence. A perfect sphere of absolute nothingness, several astronomical units in diameter. It did not reflect light. It did not emit radiation. It did not have a gravitational field. It was a hole in the universe, a wound in reality itself. It was the silence. As they watched, a Cathar scout ship sent to take closer readings approached the edge of the sphere. And then it was gone, not destroyed, not pulled in, not vaporized. It simply ceased to be. Its energy signature vanished from the sensors, its psionic presence winked out of existence. It was as if it had never been. Aboard the Pathfinder, a horrified hush fell over the bridge. Xyler stared at the view screen, his reptilian features a mask of disbelief. What was that? What is that thing? Thorn's face was grim, his calm exterior finally cracking to reveal the profound unease beneath. It's not a thing, Commander. It's a state of being, the end of being, the silence. It's of a cosmic predator, something that consumes existence itself. The megastructures, they weren't a wall to keep something out. They were a cage. And the builders, they didn't vanish. They were the first meal. The truth of it settled upon them with the weight of a dying star. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were not even significant players. They were simply the next course in a cosmic banquet they had not known they were attending. The ancient, vanished civilization, the builders of the Dyson spheres and the ringworlds, a species so advanced they could move planets, had encountered the silence. And they had lost. Their final act was not one of defiance, but of desperation. They had built a cage, a perimeter of warning beacons, a final, desperate message to any who might follow. Flee. But as the fleet sat in the silent, terrifying presence of the void at Erebus, a new signal began to emerge from the nothingness. It was not the complex, mathematical warning of the builders. It was different. It was biological, a psychic whisper faint and almost lost in the cosmic background noise. It was a voice filled with a pain and a loneliness that was billions of years old, and it was calling to them. The Lumina emissaries on board the Pathfinder convulsed in their containment fields, their serene light turning a FR. Antic, fearful red. Their collective consciousness was overwhelmed by the sheer, ancient power of the voice. It's a consciousness, the lead Lumina emissary projected, its voice strained and filled with static. Trapped, inside the silence, it is the builder or what's left of it, a single surviving mind. It has been calling out for eons, its thoughts stretched and distorted by the nothingness. It is what created the warning signal. It is trying to tell us something. Thorn and Xyler exchanged a look, a shared understanding passing between the human and the Cathar. They had come seeking answers and they had found a nightmare, but they had also found something else. A survivor, a witness, a potential key to understanding and perhaps fighting the ultimate enemy. Can you communicate with it? Thorn asked, his voice low and urgent. We can try, the Lumina replied. But to do so, we must open ourselves to it. We must touch the silence. The decision was made. The Lumina, protected by the combined technological and psychic shielding of the fleet, extended a psionic tendril into the void, a fragile thread of consciousness reaching into the absolute nothingness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the bridge of the Pathfinder was flooded with a torrent of images, emotions, and sounds that were not sounds. They saw galaxies consumed, stars extinguished like candles in a solar wind. They felt the terror of a trillion souls as their existence was unwritten from the cosmic ledger. They witnessed the birth of the silence, not as a natural phenomenon, but as a weapon that had been unleashed in an ancient, forgotten war between beings whose power dwarfed that of the gods themselves. a weapon that had broken free of its masters and had begun to consume everything, indiscriminately. And they heard the voice of the last builder. It was not a voice of despair, but of defiance. It had survived, its consciousness preserved in a pocket of reality it had created at the heart of the silence, a last, desperate act of self-preservation. It had been watching, waiting, for billions of years, for a species with the right combination of courage, curiosity, and chaos to finally hear its call. "You have come," the voice whispered in their minds, a thought that was older than their son. "You are not like the others, they were too ordered, too predictable. The silence consumes order, it feeds on patterns, but you bring chaos, you bring emotion, you bring life. It is the one thing the silence cannot understand, the one thing it cannot consume, it is your only weapon." The revelation washed over them, a tidal wave of dawning, terrifying understanding. Humanity's greatest perceived weakness, its emotional, chaotic, unpredictable nature, was its greatest strength. The Cathar's rigid order, the Vex's unyielding logic, the very things they had valued as the cornerstones of civilization, were the things that made them vulnerable. The faked beasts had been a performance to deceive the Cathar, but the real beast, the untamed, chaotic spirit of life itself, was the only thing that could stand against the encroaching, absolute, and final silence. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, light years from home, on the precipice of an abyss that threatened to consume all of reality, the human and the Cathar looked at each other, their old divisions, their old prejudices, burned away in the face of this ultimate existential threat. They were no longer two species. They were one, the first soldiers in a war for existence itself. "Commander," Thorne said, his voice quiet but filled with a resolve of forged steel, "set a course back to the Imperium. We have a lot of work to do. We need to teach a galaxy of stoics and logicians how to feel again. We need to teach them how to be beasts." Xyler, the old Cathar warrior, looked at the sphere of nothingness on the view screen, at the silent, patient enemy that waited to consume them all. And for the first time in his long, disciplined life, he allowed himself to feel. He felt fear. He felt anger. But most of all, he felt a fierce, burning flicker of hope. He looked at the human beside him, this strange, small creature from a chaotic, noisy world, and he saw not an ally, but a savior. He nodded, his golden eyes gleaming with a new and unfamiliar fire. "Make it so, Ambassador. Let the performance begin." The galaxy had a new enemy, and for the first time it had a real, fighting chance. The silence was coming, but for the first time life was ready to roar back.